Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today I'll be showing you how to make this text flash effect. Text is going to break apart as if it was hacked in pieces by a katana. It is a cool and popular effect, which is kinda overused in Japanese animations. This effect is going to utilize a node group we made in Text Fracture tutorial. If you have not watched that video, it might be a good idea to follow that one first. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, as soon as we get into Blender, we'll hop right into Geometry Nodes Layout, A to select all, X to delete. Shift A, add mesh plane. Using numpad 7 and 5, go to top rows graphic view, click on new, delete group input, replace it with a string input. Type in test, pass it through strings to curve, then output. Right, for this effect, we will be using a node group that we've made in Text Fracture effect video. So if you've watched that and already have that registered as an asset, open up an asset browser and find that node group. For me, it is called, where is it? Text Fracture. Yeah, here it is, Text Fracture, and drag it in. If you've made the node group but do not have it registered as an asset, go to File, then Append, find the blend file that contains the node group, go to Node Tree, then append the node group. Once that is done, you can add it through Add, Group, and if you find that node group, you can add it in here. Okay. Right. So, if you have not made it, if you haven't watched the video and have not made it, what you can do is I'm gonna have a link here, and you can watch the video, or I'm just gonna show it to you right now, so you can go through it and try to recreate it on your own. Okay, right. So this node group contains about 50 nodes total, so it should take about maybe 10-15 minutes, but it might be easier to just create it from here. Of course, it's not gonna have a full explanation, but yeah, it shouldn't take that long, right? Okay, once that is done, let's just quickly go over how to use this node group. You can just place this node after the strings to curve, and you can control the resolution here. I'm just gonna set it to 0.1 for now. And what this node does is based on the splitter group ID, it's gonna break apart the text mesh. Okay, so say for example, if I use a Voronoi texture and add a mask node here and multiply it by 100, multiply the color by 100 to make it into an integer, and if we pass it through the splitter group, then the text breaks apart like this. Now if I were to turn up the resolution, you can see there's a little bit more cleaner cut, and we can also increase the scale to make it break apart much more. Okay, so we don't have to basically limit ourselves to Voronoi texture. So today what we'll be using instead is going to be a handmade node group, which is called Flash Map. I'm just gonna reduce the resolution down, and if I were to visualize this, I'm actually just gonna mute this guy. I'm gonna have a grid, and I'm gonna bump up the vertices to 500, and let's just pass this into a viewer. If I were to increase the iteration with this node group, you can see that there's a lot of overlapping shapes, basically, with different grayscale values. Basically what it's doing is it's making cuts in different places, and it's overlapping different grayscale values to make this pattern. Okay, so this is what we're going to be using to break apart our text. So I'm just going to delete this node group for now, and we'll just bring this guy down, and let's start making it over here. Okay, so this is how we're going to do it. We're going to just pick a random point and drive random angle lines through it, and also then overlap it with the same kind of line, and we'll just keep on iterating. Okay, so first thing that we'll have to do is from the grid we'll get a bounding box, and from min we'll get a random value, we'll get a random vector value and connect to max as well. For ID and seed, I'm gonna pull out a value node for both of them. So we will be reusing these two values in different locations. Next, we'll grab a position node and use a vector mass to subtract the random value from position. Then use a vector rotate and rotate the vector on z-axis. For the angle value, we'll use another random, and this is going to be an angle that is between 0 and 360, so I'm just going to input a tau. And for ID and seed, we'll just connect these guys. Right, next we'll pass it through a gradient texture, and from the factor we'll get a greater than, and we'll pass this guy into the viewer. Right, so this is how it looks. There's a line that goes through it, and it's going to divide up the white portion and the black portion. Okay, but we actually want these in grayscale, so we are going to add another part to it. Grab a switch, change the type to float, and connect the result. For false, we're gonna set it to 1, and for true, I'm just gonna pull out another random value and set them into 0.5. Okay, and for ID and seed, just as before, we're gonna connect these guys. I'm just gonna reroute. Right, and if I output this, you'll see a really light gray portion and a white portion. Now what we'll do is repeat this process and overlap these patterns, so it's gonna have unique gray scale value to it. So I'm just gonna add a repeat zone, and let's split it apart like that. Then open up the side panel with N, go to node tab, and then change the socket name to map, and change the type to float. Okay, so map and float. Next, add another socket and make this into an iterator of type integer. For initialization, I'm going to initialize the map to 1, and I'm just going to pull out an add node and add 1 to the iterator, then plug it back into the output, like so. Okay. Next, add a mass node and drop it in the map line, then change the type to multiply, and multiply the map by the switch result right here. Okay. Lastly, I'm just gonna grab the iterator and bring it down here to the reroute that connects to ID, and I'm just going to delete this value node. Okay, reconnect from here to the viewer from the repeat output. Then I'm just gonna increase the iterations like so, right? So now you can see all these lines coming in and making different shades of gray on this grid. Alright, I'm just gonna put it back to 1. So this portion is done, so I'm gonna disconnect this geometry from the viewer and kind of rearrange it like so. Let's see. Okay. And also I'm gonna pull out a value node from iterations, actually, sorry, value node. Okay, and I'm just gonna bring these guys down a bit. Then grabbing all the nodes within the repeat zone, do a Control G to make it into a node group. And for the group input, they've renamed the input to, well, input, so I'm just going to call it and make it into seed, right? Seed is going to be a type of integer, so this is going to be how it looks. Alright, tab back out. I no longer need these guys on the outside, so I'm just going to delete them. And I'm gonna call this node group /map. Okay. Then I'm gonna bring it all the way up to where all the text is. Then let's reconnect it. So from curve instance, I'm gonna get a realize instance. Then connect the geometry to /map. Increase the iterations to 10. That should be sufficient, and connect the map to value, then multiply. Okay. Alright, so let's see how it looks. Alright, the resolution is at 0.01, so I'm just going to bump it up to 0.001, so it's cleaner right now. And now, since this operation takes a pretty hefty amount of time, it's probably going to take over a second, so you don't really want to keep this operation active all the time. So what I'm going to do is add a bake node and pop it in here. And in order to use a bake, I'll need to save it. So let's save it as whatever file name. Then I'm going to bake. Okay. All right. So now the baking is complete. Let's move on to making animation. So I'm just gonna add a translate instance and noise texture. From the color, I'm gonna add a vector mass, change the type to subtract, and subtract 0.5 from them. From the result, add another vector mass, change it to multiply, and input 110, so it's constrained to the XY axis. Then I'm gonna just add a scale. Plug the result into translation, and you can see it actually moves uniformly, so we don't want that. From noise texture vector, I'm going to pull out a named attribute and enter center into here. Okay, so now all the fragments are broken into pieces like so. Okay, great. Let's get this associated with scene time and have it animating. So let's add a scene time. Then from seconds, pull out a map range. I'm gonna change the from min and from max to 1 and 2, so the animation runs between 1 second and 2 seconds. Then I'm gonna pull out a float curve and change the curve like so. Okay. Lastly, I'm gonna have a multiply and multiply it by 5, so it moves fast. It moves a little bit further. Okay. Then I'm gonna plug in scale. Right. If I were to animate this, the text is gonna break apart like so. So actually the text part is pretty much done, so I'm gonna add a material by using set material. Pull out a shader editor, click on new. I'm gonna call this m_text, and I'm gonna replace the principal BSDF with just regular RGB. Okay, I'm gonna turn it all the way up to white and plug it in. Then I'm gonna set the material to m_text. Right. So next is the slash part. What I'm gonna do is go to the 3D viewer, add a curve bezier, go into edit mode, and rotate the handle so it looks kind of like this, right? Kind of like a Nike logo, right? Like that swoosh. Go to the data section and turn up the resolution for both preview and render. And let's add another geometry node. Okay. Right, for this geometry node, first thing we'll do is resample. Change the count to 100. Then we'll add a set curve radius. Then use this curve to mesh node to convert it to mesh. For profile curve, pull out a curve line. Set the x to -0.5 and 0.5, and set the rest of it to 0. Okay, so it looks kind of like that. For the curve radius, I'm going to add a multiply right here. And I'm going to set the top value to 0.05. From the bottom value, I'm going to pull out a float curve. And from the float curve value, let's add a spline parameter factor. Okay. I'm just going to change the curve to look like this. Right. And let's get this animating. So I'm gonna add a scene time. From seconds, I'm gonna use a subtract and subtract 0.2 from it. Then use a multiply and multiply it by 5. So this is gonna be the starting time and this is gonna be the speed. Then use a subtract and reconnect the factor like so. Okay. Alright. So if I were to run the animation, you can see that swoosh coming in. The slashing part goes like that. And then the text breaks. Okay. The position is kind of off, so I'm just gonna grab this and move it around to overlap the text like so. And I'm gonna go and make a material for this as well. Set material. Okay, let's actually go over here. And I'm gonna set the end frame to about 60 frames like so. Let's open up another shader editor, get another material and call this m_slash. I'm going to replace the principal BSDF with emission. Set the strength to about 5, color to be a little bit of slight blue hue, and plug it into surface. Set the world background color to black, and let's see it rendered in render view. Nope, before that I have to set the material to m/. Okay, so if I run the animation, it kind of looks like that, but it doesn't look like it's shining. So what we'll have to do is go into a compositor. From Blender version 4.2, the bloom option in the render section has been removed. So I believe this is the only way we can use bloom. So after going to compositor, open up click on use nodes, and grab a glare filter and plug it in here. Change the type to bloom, and from the 3D viewport, let's change the viewport shading of compositor to always, like so. Okay, so now if I were to run the animation, you can see the slash coming in, text breaking apart, and yeah, it looks like it's being cut open. Okay, of course you can add more slashes to make it, like it's cutting apart a lot of it, but for the sake of tutorial, I'm just going to keep it as one. All right, cool. So the effect is done, so let's review what we just made. Okay, so this is for the text itself. Bulk of the heavy lifting is done by this text fracture node, but today I just kind of showed you how to create your own texture map, the slash map. So if you have texture if you don't have a texture that you can find within a normal Blender, you can create your own, kind of like this, to plug it into a text fracture node. Okay. Alright, so this is for the text part. For the slash part, it's a simple node group like this. Alright. Okay. So, this effect is kind of cool. You can kind of see how it breaks apart. And yeah, it's a neat way to use, node group like this. There